The pedagogy of Mystory comes out of Greg Ulmer's book Teletheory. In this book, Ulmer attempts to describe a kind of learning that is appropriate for the 20th century. He sees the benefits of including new technology and expanding past traditional literacy into what he calls electracy. Despite the fact that this book was published in 1989, Ulmer's concepts can still find significance today. Mystory originated as a response to the idea that historiography would not have been chosen as the method of understanding and learning if the method had been invented in the 20th century. History stems from the 19th century's focus on science and art. During this time, there was a quest for truth and enlightenment. The idea that there could be one truth existed. In opposition to that, Ulmer argues that history does not really have a place in today's world. Instead, in this postmodern world where we acknowledge many different truths and many different perspectives, there needs to be a pedagogy that acknowledges those different views and experiences, thus the development of the Mystory. I think that one of the most illuminating explanations of Mystory is the juxtaposition of the riddle and the joke. A riddle has an answer or a truth as its result, whereas a joke can be interpreted in different ways and is not based in truth but in subjectivity. This juxtaposition really brought to light for me the idea of escaping a concern for truth or for an overarching certainty. Although a move towards a pedagogy that acknowledges individuals and their experiences seems rather straightforward, when reading Chapter 3 in Ulmer's Teletheory, one might become caught up in the dense theory and explanations that accompany the description of Mystory. To better understand, one should break down and investigate some of the associations that Ulmer makes. Ulmer explains that the word Mystory can have many explanations and connotations. When I view the word, my thoughts may go to history, while someone else could associate it with mystery. It is through grammatology and these associated words that Mystory can be explained deeper. Those that I will focus on today include history, mystery, my story, and finally what Ulmer calls envoi. When one first reads the word Mystory, often the association with history becomes apparent. Perhaps one might think it is my history. This breakdown of the word reveals some of the underlying tenets of Mystory. It is not a history, it is one person's personal history. It is from the perspective of one person and is meaningful to them. Through personal experience or through my history, I might develop my own knowledge. There is no concern for the truth, only for individual learning and understanding. My history may give me a unique perspective on a subject that greatly differs from yours, but in the end, the knowledge is meant for one person, the one creating the Mystory, whether that knowledge is about oneself or a topic in school. In Cecilia Jones's work, one can clearly see the impact of her history. She includes pictures, video, music, etc. that all relate to her history. She explains her family, her childhood, her love of horses, the loss of her mother, her hometown, etc. Everything is explained through her. It is her personal history that all interconnects to provide her with the knowledge that is meaningful to her. Another association that Ulmer makes with Mystory is the concept of her story. It is my understanding that her story was a term derived from the feminist reaction to the patriarchal terminology so prevalent in our language. If there is a history, then there should be a her story. I think that that can be continued on to my story. Everyone should be able to tell his or her story equally. Although her story comes from feminism, my story is for everyone. All peoples have their stories, and they cannot be bracketed into dualities, such as men versus women, poor versus rich, black versus white. No person is defined by just one thing alone. Therefore, my story allows for people to express themselves subjectively in a way that only they could, through their own perspective. This concept of uniqueness and individuality can certainly be seen in Cecilia's Mystory. It would be impossible for anyone else to have created the same story. It is from Cecilia and it is for Cecilia. One can even see how the temporality makes it unique. Cecilia will never be that same girl from that point in time, making her perspective and her learning a kind of progress exclusive to her. A third association that Ulmer makes between Mystory and other similar words is mystery. The two words are extremely similar, so much so that when you Google Mystory, the search engine actually asks you whether you meant mystery and would like to change the search. It is not surprising, therefore, that Mystory has some aspects of mystery within it. The mystery that is associated with Mystory relates to the ideas of conjecture and intuition. Instead of calculating and imposing a set of rules on the learning process, Mystory allows for the student to use intuition to develop learning. Intuition comes from the student being within the action of writing or creating the Mystory. Mystory is not about regurgitating the known, but exploring and developing the previously unknown. Although mystery relates mostly to the process of creating a Mystory, it was still evident within Cecilia's work. As she explained, some of the sections, especially the career section of her Mystory, was difficult for her and changed from her original idea. In the end, she was imposing too many rules on what she was doing, but eventually just let inspiration come to her and teach her about herself and those aspects of her story. The next association that is pointed out in Teletheory is my story. Although this seems very similar to the association with history, it focuses on explaining that the my story relates to oneself. People first are introduced to language through hearing it rather than speaking, and therefore what they hear helps create their own story. They are part of the story as well as everything that they have heard are part of their stories. All of our stories are related to other stories and other people. No one person can be fully removed from society, from others, and from the stories that they grew up with. Therefore, as is evident in Cecilia's My Story, with aspects such as her explanation of family and her emblem, one cannot escape being affected by others. Knowledge and learning is flowing and moves between people as they affect each other. The final concept that Ulmer relates to the pedagogy of Mystory is envoi. When I first read the explanation of envoi in Teletheory, I found it confusing, but essentially I think it boils down to the idea that Mystory is something that is being discovered as it develops. Envoi in French literally means sending, which implies that learning is being created and sent as it is being discovered. Envoi is rather vague, but it can be seen through the discovery of a direction. The actual process of Mystory helps create learning and meaning and invention. As shown through Cecilia's work and her reflection on the project, her learning was discovered and the Mystory changed for her as she used it. I think that the concept of envoi is a reminder that Mystory is a process and is being invented as it is being used. Overall, Mystory is a form of heuristics, which is an aspect of logic that is concerned with discovery and invention. All of the association Ulmer makes with other concepts help to explain how an individual can discover learning, how an individual's relation to history, mystery, her story, and my story all help create something new, something that develops and has never been in existence before.